The last few days, well, the last month really, I've been getting a bunch of different messages, and I had several people ask me in person when I was in Dayton about hiking on a gluten-free diet. And so since I've been getting so many messages and things like that, I figured I'd just take a minute to make a short little video about some of the things that I eat on the trail that are gluten-free, and a little bit about my strategy. This is not exhaustive, and really this is an example of what I'm taking on my upcoming 2-day trip. It's not necessarily what I would put in every single box, but it gives you kind of an idea of what the basics and my strategy is. So first thing we'll start with are the dinners, the meals, and the brand that I use most are Good to Go if I'm using a packaged meal, mainly because almost all of their packaged meals are gluten-free. They also make a lot of their meals are vegan as well. And so if you have a limited diet and you're looking to buy a pre-made meal, theirs are some of the best out there. And in addition to that, sometimes I'll make my own. That requires a little bit more planning and forethought, but that's certainly an option, and I can talk more about that later in the future. My secret ingredient that I always put in all my meals is coconut oil. Obviously, I don't carry this gigantic jar. I scoop it into smaller packaging, depending on the length of my trip. Trader Joe's also sells little individual packets. Those are what I use on really long distance hikes when I'm doing resupply boxes. The reason I include the coconut oil is that I feel like a lot of the processed food we eat when we're on the trail has lower quality fats in it, so I like to make sure I'm getting high quality fats in my diet. So adding coconut oil, pack out avocados and that sort of thing. I like coconut oil because it's the least messy of all the different oils I've tried to carry. Olive oil somehow manages to always escape whatever packaging you put it in. Butter, if it's cooler, works, but also that one can also melt and get all over everything. Coconut oil seems to be the most stable for carrying around in a backpack, at least as far as I found. I have some dark chocolate in this bag already packaged up for this weekend, and I like to eat that as my dessert. Dark chocolate is also not prone to melting, and it also has a lot of bioflavonoids and antioxidants and things in it, so it's super helpful, and also it's nice to have dessert. So next we'll go with breakfast. Breakfast varies for me. When I'm feeling luxurious, we'll do something like a hot oatmeal. Again, like a Good to Go makes this gluten-free oatmeal, and I like to mix in trail butter, especially the espresso one. This just really adds a lot of quality fats and protein to breakfasts or hot foods. Sometimes I just eat this plain, like on my FKTs. This was my breakfast. It's basically a 700 calorie pouch of caffeine and sugar and fat and nut butter. So this was basically what fueled me on my FKTs. Other times I'll do this on tortillas or something like that. It just depends on whether I'm cooking or how much time I'm taking in the morning. It's still winter right now, so we're definitely having a stove and having nice hot oatmeal breakfast with coffee and that sort of thing, which brings me to beverages. I love coffee, so I found this brand, the CS brand. I like this for backpacking because each of these packets makes 16 to 20 ounces of coffee, which is the amount of coffee I actually want to drink. I found when I was using Starbucks Vias or other little instant packets that I was using 2 or 3 at a time because I wanted a lot of coffee. So I found that, and that works great for me because then I can make actual large serving of coffee in the morning. Throughout the day, I usually use some sort of Noon product. Right now I'm going to be using this Noon Endurance, which has calories and electrolytes in it, or you can just use the regular Noon tablets. I'm using that on this trip just for a little extra calories. And then in the evenings, since it's wintertime, I like to have either tea, or I've been using this Noon Rest, which has magnesium and stuff in it, so it's good for muscles and for relaxing at the end of the day. Nice to have a belly full of hot liquids in the evening when it's 20 degrees out, which is the predicted lows this weekend. And then the next category is snacks. Snacks are sometimes the easiest and sometimes the hardest. So it really just comes down to what you like to eat and finding things that are gluten-free. So we'll stick with the theme of the electrolytes. I use these Fuel 100 Electrobites. I don't know that I'm going to get that sweaty, but it is nice to always have some sort of salty snack. For me, salty snacks are the hardest to find gluten-free because most of the like Gardettos and like pretzels and all that stuff, they're obviously made from wheat. And you can eat potato chips and things like that. I avoid MSG, so it's hard for me to even find potato chips that I can eat. So that brings me to corn chips. I will eat a lot of corn chips on a hike, and I won't eat that entire bag on 2 days, but for example, I will eat some chips on this hike. And I also like cheese, or sometimes you can get these dehydrated cheeses, which are lighter than carrying cheese. Since I'm going to be carrying a really warm sleeping bag, I'm going with the dehydrated cheese on this trip versus the fresh cheese. Also, it's only 2 days. I can survive on dehydrated cheese instead of fresh cheese. And I like dried fruit. You can tell I just recently went to Trader Joe's probably. And so I have a bunch of Trader Joe's snacks for this trip. Trader Joe's does have a lot of gluten-free stuff. But dried fruit is always a good one. It should always be gluten-free. And so you can also do trail mixes. Dried nuts and things like that usually weren't going to have wheat in them. And that's a good way to get your salty snack in as well. I also have found seaweed for a savory snack. Doesn't really have a lot of calories, but it can really help with some micronutrients like iodine, and also gives you that kind of that salty flavor that you can't always find. I don't like to spend $6 on a bag of gluten-free pretzels or gluten-free chips, or not chips, crackers. It just seems wasteful to me. And then sometimes on a shorter trip I'll make my own, but this time since I was at the Trader Joe's, I got some gluten-free cookies. These are like my big splurge. This particular brand of gluten-free cookie is amazing, and I love them, and it's kind of compulsive. I will eat the entire package in one day, in one sitting. I also recently found these cinnamon apple sticks. They're pretty good. So really it just kind of takes some examination, and so when I've been prepping for longer distance hikes, I will go to the supermarket and literally just spend an hour, make sure you're well fed before you attempt this, walking up and down all the aisles, looking, at things you wouldn't ordinarily buy, and just finding things that are gluten-free that you think would do well on the trail, and either making a mental note or actual physical note of what is available out there, because especially in the midst of like a long distance hike, when you walk into a grocery store after you've been on the trail for a while and you're hangry and overwhelmed by all the colors and choices and things like that, it's easy to just wander around like a deer in the headlights throughout the store and not actually end up finding anything. And when you've got a dietary restriction, it makes it even harder. And I find that I fall into the same pattern of buying the exact same like 3 things every time I go into the store, and then you get really sick of them. And so having a chance to examine calmly prior to your hike what's available out there can be really helpful. And if you have the time and the desire, I recommend going to a full-fledged supermarket, and then also going to a small independent grocer, and then even a convenience store. Because when you're on these long distance trails, sometimes you're not resupplying at the big supermarket, you're resupplying at little tiny places that aren't going to have the same variety. So giving yourself kind of the tools to know what to look for, like, oh, I'm in a small independent grocery store in this little tiny town, I'll look and see if they have these things, because this is what I found in the small independent grocery I went to back home. And so it can help you be more prepared, have more tools to build a successful resupply. And so for anybody, regardless of whether you have a dietary restriction or not, what I recommend is focusing on not just calories, but your macronutrients, ensuring that you get adequate protein, adequate healthy fats, as well as adequate carbohydrates, because your body needs all of those things in good measure when you're out there hiking day after day and day after day, putting in the miles. And so yeah, hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of what I eat on the trail, gives you maybe some ideas about things you hadn't thought of before, and shows you that it is possible to eat gluten-free on the trail and eat really well. So, thank you.